Hi, welcome. My name's Tolman. I perform a thing called memory at the speed of sight. If you've ever watched me in an audience out across the United States or Canada, I will stand up in front of an audience and I will memorize 100 pieces of information that I've never been exposed to before, and I do it in about 8 seconds or less. Again, I call this memory at the speed of sight. And the reason that you're watching this video is so that in this presentation you can understand the exact methodologies and procedures that you're going to have to become skill functional with in order to do this same kind of skill performance in your own mind. My purpose is to teach you 3 psychovisual exercises that as you practice them for about 30 minutes a day for 30 days, you will understand how it is that people can learn at the speed of sight, as opposed to what in educational circles is called rote learning. We'll be talking about rote memory and about the principles of which I base memory at the speed of sight upon in just a few moments. Before I get into this and go any further, I would like to point out to you a statue to my left. This young lady is a goddess from ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and her name is Mnemosyne. If you've ever heard me speak, you've probably heard me refer to Mnemosyne because some of the principles of memory that you're going to be learning about deals with a science of mnemonics. That's spelled M-N-E-M-O-N-I-C-S, mnemonics. Mnemonics, loosely translated from the Greek culture, simply means any aid to the memory through sight or sound. Now, Mnemosyne, in the ancient Greek culture, was the goddess of memory. She was the mother of all learning. They taught that the human body is a museum. They believed the human body was a living museum. The word museum means house of muses or house of knowledge. It was Mnemosyne that they believed was in charge of this house and its inner dynamics, that memory was the power of this building, this museum. Mnemosyne then, being the goddess of memory, had 9 daughters. They were known as the 9 muses. The 9 muses represented the 9 knowledges of mankind. Now, as you look at Mnemosyne, they believed that memory was a feminine principle throughout the universe, that memory received information and then worked upon it and sent it back out, pregnant with new ideas, overflowing with the growth of new creations of thought and development. As you look at Mnemosyne, you see in her left hand that she's holding her bow. The bow was always a symbol of promise, that which was to come. In her right hand, she's holding an arrow. An arrow is that which has been delivered from the recesses of the knowledge and the intelligence that is contained and held by memory. I'm not sure if the cameraman can get this, but if he can shoot down and see the dog by her side. This dog was a symbol of the dog star in ancient Greece, today known as Sirius in Canis Major. It is the dog with his muzzle or nose by her knee. The knee was a symbol of being humble, that every knee should bow to truth, to knowledge, to intelligence, and that it was the dog star. And if you look into etymology, the word dog goes through what is called syncopation and telescoping, and finally a reversal to where it spells God backwards. And the name of God, or the symbol of the dog, was that knowledge and intelligence is our best friend. That it is knowledge and intelligence that will lead us forward and help us as mankind and as individuals to obtain the highest potential that is within us. So it's in honor of the goddess Mnemosyne from the ancient Greek culture that I stand in front of you here today. I want to share with you some understandings from these antiquitous cultures, these ancient societies who understood principles of memory, I think, far deeper and better than we do even today. In my discussion here with you, and in my teaching you these 3 psychovisual principles that you're going to enact and perform 30 minutes a day for the next 30 days in order to become functional with memory at the speed of sight, in all of this, I'm going to avoid all of the theoretical harangue of science. Now, I have a background in neuroanatomy, in the cognitive sciences. I could speak to some of my colleagues in that area very, very well. But I'm going to avoid that today simply because I think that if I discussed memory in terms of science today, that most of you would blank out on me and not catch what I want for you to have. Plus, I think that the language that I'm going to use from ancient times and in layman terms is really more honest. It is not filled with academic sophistry. It is straight to the heart and to the mind, an understanding of memory and how far you can take this skill. You see, if I asked you, what is memory? What is memory? Some of you would respond with answers like, well, the ability to recall. It's remembering. True enough. If you look up memory in a good American Heritage College dictionary, it might say that memory is a recall of past events, experiences, and data. And although that's true enough, that really says little about memory and what it really is. Where it comes from. What is the process? Where does it originate? Where does it go when it gets lost? Is there something we can do to get it back? If I went to a cognitive scientist and I said to her, what is memory? She may give you a very standard definition amongst the scientists who study neuroanatomy and the brain. They would say memory seems to be that phenomenon which is experienced when the RNA molecular proteins that are created during sleep photoelectrochemically, synaptically burn off near neuronal complex, causing an engramic fusion. Goes into postural entrainment, gets into gestalt and operant conditioning, blah, blah, blah. It could go on for 3 pages. And when they got finished, you would realize and understand that they themselves honestly have no clue as to what memory is. It really is basically academic sophistry. I realized years ago, back at school, at the university level, that we really didn't know what memory is, that we didn't know where it originates. We don't know where it goes when it gets lost. We don't even know how to retrieve it. Now, in the past 23 years, on my own, in anecdotal studies, not laboratory, simply on my own, undocumented. And I want you to understand that as I go through this, I'm going to share some information with you that I feel is very precious, but also it is unsubstantiated in certain circles, and therefore not accepted as being a proven scientific or medical fact. And yet, on the other hand, I think that you're going to be able to demonstrate in your own life exactly the correctness of the principles that I'm going to share with you. And your own proof to yourself, to me, is more important than 10,000 volumes of scientific literature trying to prove something to you. So let's move into this thing slowly, and let's take it from this approach. If I say, what is memory? And we look at all these definitions and say, no, that's really not quite it, though. Then what is memory? That's what I wanted to find out. You see, I had come through my formal schooling in public school in such a way that I hadn't been exposed to the alphabet, to counting to 100, to the months of the year and the days of the week by the time I entered school. Now, the other students around me, for the most part, knew those things before we ever started school. Well, I didn't. And I'll never forget my first day of school when the school teacher looked at me and said, young man, you're new here, aren't you? And I said, yes, we just moved into the area. She said, will you please stand up and say your name and say your ABCs? I was clueless. I didn't know what she was asking of me, and so I ducked my head. She repeated herself, and I kept thinking, God, I wish she would just go away. But she didn't. She came walking down the road to where I was seated. She took a hold of me and helped me out of my chair. She walked me up front and said, "That's okay. We've got all day." I remember at that point, I absolutely just burst out in tears and ran out and ran home. I swore I would never go to school again. You see, my mother and father were not the kinds of people who introduced to their children academic kinds of things. They hadn't taught us our alphabet and how to count to 100 and the months of the year. It wasn't that I was stupid, it's just that I hadn't been exposed to the ideas. But anyway, I said I would never go back. Now you have to understand, my mother, bless her heart, I just love her to pieces. She's about 5 feet tall, and back then she probably weighed 300 plus pounds. She said, "You're going to go to school, young man, or I'm going to sit on you." I said, "I'm not going anyway." And so she drugged me back to school for 2 weeks straight, sat by my side just to make sure that I would go, and eventually I started going again. By the 4th grade, my sister and I were assigned in this new little town that we had moved into special education. And I'm here to tell you that there's nothing really special about special education. At least there wasn't back then. Maybe things have changed today. By the time I was out of high school, most of the grades that I had ever received were D's, D minuses, and D pluses. As I was getting ready to get out of high school, it came to my attention from the school counselors. The only way I was going to graduate was if they got me a job through the DECA program, Distributive Education Club of America. I don't know if they still have that, but they had it back then. And it was a thing where I went to school half a day and I worked for 8 hours a day at a foundry. A foundry is a metals reduction plant. It's where they melt metal. And we had these air hammers that we made black sand molds. And we would set them out in what was called the pour room floor. And when the metal was all liquid, we would take it out and pour it in. Very hot, filthy, laborious job. But by working there, I got school credit, and in that way I was able to graduate from high school. Well, high school graduation come and went. All of my friends were going off to universities and into the military and getting on with their lives. I was staying at the foundry. I didn't figure I had the kinds of grades that could really carry me into getting what would be called a decent job or something else. I figured I was pretty well stuck. And it began to hurt. I had never really given school much thought all throughout my school experience. In special education, you don't have to study a lot. Didn't have to give a lot of thought to many things, and I hadn't. But then all of a sudden, I'm out of high school. I'm working at the foundry at $1.90 an hour. And you've got to remember, this is back in the 60s. No kidding. And so there I am. I remember I got off of graveyard shift. Now, if you've never worked rotating shifts, don't. But I was getting off of graveyard. I was going up to the post office where I lived, and I was going to check the mail before I went home. A lady hollers out and says, "Don, I'd like to talk to you." I was kind of scared. Mostly because adults typically didn't, talk to me that much. She came up to me, put her hands on my face, and said, "Young man, it's important that I talk to you." And I said, "What's that?" And she says, she looked right into my eyes, and I realized at that point, I had never looked another human being in the eyes, not even my own mother. And she said, "You are not stupid." And I remember looking at her and thinking, cool. I mean, what do you say to somebody like that? And she says, "I'm going to help you get back into college." Now, back when I was a young kid, 18 years old, we were being told that if you didn't go to college, you were nobody's nothing. They didn't have entrepreneurial kinds of things to help you succeed in life financially and other things. We were being taught that if you didn't get into college, you were nobody's nothing, you'd never amount to a hill of beans. That's just basically the way that it was. And because of John F. Kennedy passing a certain program where if you could pass a college entrance exam, then they would let you in on probation into that university. And you'd be there for 3 months on probation. If you could maintain a 2.0 or a C average, then you could continue for a year. If you maintained a 2.0 or a C average for a year, they would take you off probation and let you mainstream into college. You have to remember, back in the late 60s, they were very interested in college and education and really pushing that to a high level, even more so than now, I believe. So anyway, I took a lot of college exams, finally passed one, got myself into university. It was at the university level that I finally started to make some breakthroughs in my own understandings about what memory is, about how it is that we learn, and how it is that we can improve our mental condition and thereby change our external world. I remember sitting in a class in a snake pit. It's where the chairs are one above the other like this, professors down front. This particular day, we were listening to a professor who was considered one of the greatest cognitive scientists of our day. He had helped to establish the parapsych labs there at this university. And he turns to us and he says, I wonder how many of you students in here realize and understand that grades in school are not indicative of, they are not a barometer for, they are not a measurement of how smart or how dumb you are. I had never heard that before. I had believed that all of my D's and D minuses and D pluses in school was showing me how stupid I was. And he was just saying the reverse. One of the most brilliant men at that time on the planet, as far as what his colleagues believed about him. And he's saying grades in school were not a measurement of how smart or how dumb you are. In fact, he went on to say that grades in school can measure one thing and one thing only. And that's your interest in that class. He's saying that interest is the key to learning. And so it is. Interest is the mother of observation. Observation is the mother of memory, learning, and recall. Anything we naturally, organically, sensorially observe here, we understand and know. It's our lack of interest that causes us not to observe. He took it a step further and he said, if the truth be known, grades in school are nothing more than a measurement of how interestingly the teacher presents that material to the student. It was his contention that anyone on this planet could learn any technology if it's presented to them in a way that is interesting to them. Then he went on to say this, and this is what kind of set me free. He said, I wonder how many of you students here realize and understand that you cannot test a person's IQ. There is no such thing as an accurate IQ test. Intelligence quotient is something that is not measurable. He said the boys at Princeton that designed those first IQ tests and put them into the educational sector knew within 2 years that they had created a huge faux pas, that they had made a mistake. But the problem was they were making money by giving this test. And so it was his belief that the IQ testing would be around a long time, even though it was false and erroneous. And time has tested that out. I share this with you because I know that some of you that are watching this video may have experienced what I experienced. Some of you may have children right now that are hyperactive, ADD or attention deficit syndrome children. That's what I would have been labeled if they'd have had those labels back when I was in grade school. They didn't have those labels back then. They just looked at me and said, boy, he's a problem kid. He can't sit still. He can't pay attention. He's a slow learner. At one point, they believed I was possibly a non-learner. But there I was, because I had finally passed a college entrance exam with the help of this lady that had stopped me and said, Don, you're not stupid. I'm going to help you. She helped me get into the university level on probation. And it was at that point that my understandings began to change, and my view of myself and my self-esteem and self-confidence began to change. Now, if you heard me speak at one of the seminars, you know the rest of the story and how that went. It's not my purpose here to give you all of that. What I want to do is to share with you, no matter if you consider yourself gifted and absolutely brilliant and intelligent, or if you're sitting there watching this video and thinking, I really don't have it mentally. I'm not really on cue. I'm rather slow. Or I have a poor memory. What I'm going to show you on this particular video and throughout the rest of the course that you're going to go through in this package called SMART. Sensory motor, aroma recall technologies. Memory at the speed of sight. You are going to become skill functional to the point that you're going to be able to memorize and retain information at the speed of sight. People around you will feel that you are absolutely, in some uncanny way, gifted beyond typical human experience. Before I get into the procedures, I would like to share with you what it is that I found in 23 years of research. I've studied the cognitive sciences, I've studied neuroanatomy, I've gone through some gross anatomy labs, I've seen cranial skulls, sawn open, we slowly slice through the pia shell, we lift the brain out. I've helped to do tissue samplings and biochemical tracings, all for the purpose of finding memory. And it wasn't for about 10 years of that I finally realized I was barking up the wrong tree. I was going at it from an academic approach in such a way that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. I went back and I began to study antiquitous cultures who absolutely knew and understood things about memory that we have forgotten, such as the culture of the ancient Greeks with this goddess Mnemosyne. It was their metaphor, their understanding of the human body. You see, they did believe that this body was the museum. They built a building out of stone and mortar and brass as a memorial to the body and its inner dynamics, and specifically to memory. I'm going to share this with you real quickly, and then I'll give you a definition of memory, and then we'll move right into the actual psychovisual exercises that you're going to learn and perform for the next 30 days in order to become functional with this. Basically, they built a building on the Isle of Crete and called it the museum, a memorial to the human body. They believed the human body was the museum, and this is how they described it. From the bottom of the feet to the navel was the basement. That's where they believed works for the dead were performed, meaning bringing children forth into life. In the basement, they had a brazen laver, or a font, a baptismal font, in the stone museum as a symbol that everyone is born into the waters of one of the 12 months of the year. That's why this font was on the back of 12 oxen. Ox is a symbol of the letter A and goes back to a symbol of the sun. You can look all of this up, like in a World Book Encyclopedia. It's interesting to take a look at the letters and where they came from, how they originated. Originally, all the letters of our alphabet came from an understanding of the pieces and parts, the members of the human body. From the navel to the throat was the main floor. It is here where they believed the constitution of this house was held. And if you had a strong constitution, you had a strong and healthy house. But they believed that through tithes and offerings, you could strengthen it even more. The best of the best brought to this temple, to this house, to this library as offerings. To the storehouse. Today we call it the stomach. More on this in just a second. From the throat to the top of the head. The throat was called the trumpet of God in ancient times because it literally trumpets. You have a voice, a larynx, a voice box, 3 vowels. It trumpets. Unlike an elk that has 2, they bugle. Okay, so from the trumpet of God to the top of the head was literally known as heaven. The word heaven comes from the word heaven. It means heaved up or raised above the rest of the temple proper. They went so far as to divide the heaven into 3 heavens or 3 levels. From the chin to the nose, from the nose to the brow, and from the brow to the top of the head. From the brow to the top of the head, they called that the 3rd heaven. They believed that in the 3rd heaven, you had an eye that always sees. Today we call it the mind's eye, or the eye of imagination. Back then, they called it the 3rd eye, 1, 2, and 3. They called it the always seeing eye because it always sees, and it sees in all ways. You can do things with this eye that you can't do with these eyes. You see, here you can see a Volkswagen stretched out so long that it's as big as the United States. Or you can shrink it down so small you could put it on the slide and put it on a microscope. True? See or no? See. With these 3 eyes, they had a fascinating understanding of the internal structure, inner dynamics. which in psychology and in the psychophysical sciences today we're starting to understand with using different words. But back then they had a high level of understanding. They just used different words to describe it. For instance, some cultures called this third eye the pineal. In the Judeo-Christian literature of the Bible, in Genesis 32:30 it says, "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. For I've seen God face to face and my life is preserved." As you read in the chapter up above, you'll find out that he was dreaming. And to this very day, in the midbrain, the corpus callosum, in the very base, there's a little vesical organ there, still called the pineal or pineal gland. It comes from pine cone, because a pine cone had many seeds. What they envisioned as a symbol for many eyes, much sight. The ancient Greeks called this eye the president. President means first sight. They called these two eyes the counselors, because counselor means second sight. So they believed at the head of this church, temple, and kingdom of God that you had a president and two counselors. They were supported by what they called the 12 illuminators. In the Greek, the 12 apostles. In the Latin, the 12 cranial nerves. They believed that the dome of these heavens were divided by the 12 cranial nerves. Just as the dome of the heavens above was a division of the 12 months of the year. Interesting stuff, this thing of as above, so below. That we were a microcosm of the great macrocosm above us. Which is kind of interesting because today neuroscientists know that in the dome of these heavens we have about 200 billion neurons. Now I realize that some school textbooks will say 100 billion. I don't know of anybody that got in there and counted them all yet. I like the idea of 200 billion neurons for this reason. If you were to go to a physicist, an astrophysicist, and say, how many stars are there in our galaxy? She would say, about 200 billion. I like that. I like the idea that there's 200 billion stars out there and we have 200 billion neurons. What if we had the technology and we could see that somehow, in some way, we have a neuron that is connected to or somehow matches a star out there in our galaxy? What if we have more potential than we have ever dreamed before? In fact, Peter Maravich from Russia, a neuroscientist, has finally come up with a mathematical figure that is now being used to describe the storage capacity of one human brain. It's rather fascinating. We've never had anything like that before. You see, in physics, they have all kinds of numbers and mathematical figures they work with to describe the universe and different quanta within that universe. For instance, if you were to ask a physicist, how many atoms are there in all of our galaxy, all of the matter in all of our galaxy, they would say, well, that would be represented by the number 10 followed by 80 zeros. Whew. That's a lot of atoms. See or no? See. To put that into perspective in comparison with the storage capacity of the human brain, it's this, according to the latest observational technologies which we have. You see, we finally have found out that in nanoseconds, a singular neuron can perform more functions than our most powerful computer. We understand now that a singular neuron has a storage capacity of 10 to the 28th power. That's a lot of capacity. That's bigger than our best computers so far. But what's fascinating, that's just one neuron. You have 200 billion of them. Peter, the cognitive scientist over there in Russia, finally did a mathematical thing on a computer to figure out what the storage capacity approximately of one human brain is. And it's 10 followed by 10 million kilometers of type printed zeros in 10-point format. In other words, our storage capacity is basically infinite. I guess we can begin to understand why we cannot measure human intelligence quotient. It's infinite. You cannot measure that. But the thing is this. We shouldn't concern ourselves with intelligentsia. That simply means potential. What we need to concern ourselves with is entelecheia, that which is actualized. Because you see, with all of this wondrous potential which we have, you still run into people who go, "Excuse me, what was your name again?" It's amazing. With all of this fabulous, awesome, unlimited, infinite potential, we can't remember somebody's name 3 minutes after we've heard it. There's some kind of psychophysical disconnection here. What we need is an owner's manual showing us how to boot up, how to take some mental software and plug it into the biocomputer, a user-friendly manual so that we can go in and begin to operate this in its brilliant way that it was designed for. And that's what I honestly believe that you'll get out of this system, which I have designed for you, called memory at the speed of sight. When you see me memorize 100 pieces of information in 8 seconds or less, I know that seems astounding to some people. But as you go through the methodologies and the systems, which I'm going to show you, and you become skill functional with it, my guarantee to you is this: you will memorize and learn 1,100 pieces of information at once and be able to replicate that mental energy for. Not 100 pieces of information. I just do 100 in the audience there as they write it down just to save time. You're going to learn how to do 1,100 pieces of information. That should take care of just about all your memory needs. Now, with all of this background, let's just summarize it a little bit by going into Alexandria, Egypt in antiquity, and share with you the metaphor that they used for the human body and its inner dynamics. Rather than calling it a museum, in Alexandria, Egypt, they called this body a library. It comes from the word libra, which means book. Their library had 3 levels: a basement, a main floor, and upper rooms, just like the museum. Basement, main floor, and upper rooms. A description of the human body. The Semitic tribes up near Palestine did the same thing. They called their building, though, Bethel, meaning house of God. It was their stone memorial to the human body. You see, they believed the body was some kind of temple, that it was some kind of tabernacle, that it was some kind of church, that there were records here. They believed that the records of all of your ancestors before you, back thousands of years, was recorded and passed to you, that the records are here. They believed that if you performed what they called the great magnus opus, not magnum, for students of Latin 101 that feel they need to modify the first part of that word, the phrase they used was magnus opus, the magnificent work, the work of purifying and calming the waters within, that light might shine upon you and you'll see reflected there these memories of past lives. They believed that you could learn in one lifetime the knowledge and the intelligence of 1,000 lifetimes of your ancestors before you, because the records are here. Now, real quickly, their ancient understanding of memory was this. In fact, when they created the word memory, they knew exactly what they were doing. Memory is one of the oldest words in our vocabulary. In fact, it's not even an English word, it's Hebrew. The ancient Hebrew culture, who borrowed the elements from earlier cultures of Egyptian and Phoenician and Sumerian roots, finally developed this into our word memory as a doublet. Memory is a doublet. It's a 2-part word. The first part of this word, mem, is literally the 13th letter of the ancient Hebrew alphabet, and it means water. Water. The second part of this word literally means ori, or light in the Hebrew, or the symbol of light. To the ancient people, they knew that memory was made up of the elements of water and light. You see, they recognized that whenever they were outside and the sun was shining beautifully and there was a pool of water, no matter what size, if that pool of water was perfectly calm and perfectly clear, when the light shined on it, it would reflect everything around it. They thought to themselves, they reflected to themselves, when light shines on calm, clear water, it reflects. They knew that we were some kind of earthen vessel filled with waters. Science today says, yes, you're about 70% water. The earth is about 70% water. Fruits and vegetables, about 70% water. Makes you wonder if there's some connection here. Kind of makes you wonder if you ate a few less Kit Kat candy bars, Coca-Colas, and Big Macs, and ate a few more fresh fruits and vegetables and drank more water, if somehow it wouldn't affect us in a wonderful way. I think that it would. I just don't know of anybody that's got the guts enough to try it. Only kidding. Now, you see this idea of memory being water and light. Electromagnetic energy from our sun and other star systems, light, permeates our cellular mass 24 hours a day. It is the movement of that light energy through our waters that creates reflection, cognition, memory, the ability to see, hear. Do you realize that seeing is everything? Seeing is the foundation of learning and thought. You can't even think a thought without first seeing it in your mind's eye. Try it. Try to think of anything without seeing it first. You can't. We call what we see words. We name what we see, and that is language. Whether that language is expressed through sign language, whether it's written or spoken, it is nothing more than an expression of what it is that we see. You see, all of our senses are visual. It's true. All of our senses are visual. I could have you close your eyes, and I could take this marker and put it in your hand. And through kinesthetic recall, or touch memory, one of the 7 memories that add up to general intelligentsia, you would get a picture here as to what you were holding, and you would say, marker. And would say, very good, what color? And if you were to practice feeling colors with different textures, 30 minutes a day for about 6 weeks, it has been shown in the laboratory you could pick up and sense the coolness of blues, the warmth of reds. You could tell us 8 out of 10 times the colors that you were touching. Touch creates pictures, smells create pictures, tastes create pictures, sounds create pictures. These peepers help you to create pictures. It is all visual. That's the first thing that you need to understand, is that all learning and all memory is sight. It is visual. Memory is water and light. And one last point before I get into the methodologies is this. I challenge you to drink as much water as you can on a daily basis. Most people think they drink more water than they actually do. But let's take a look at what water does. And when I say water, I mean plain, pure water. Okay? I'm not talking water in coffee. I'm not talking water in Gatorade. I'm not talking water in Coca-Colas or beers or wine, milk, what have you. I'm talking plain, pure water. When you drink plain, pure water, anatomically, infrastructurally, what happens is this. The stomach lining, which replaces itself about every 3 to 5 days because of the aciduous condition there. So the thing about water as opposed to liquid is this. You see, when you drink liquids, like I was mentioning, coffee, tea, milk, punch, Coca-Colas, whatever, it has to go down through your house, down through the system for filtration, through the urinary and intestinal tracts before it goes into the bloodstream. Now, once that moisture enters the bloodstream, there is a blood-brain barrier. It will not accept the moisturization for rehydration of the brain from the blood. The thing that you have to be aware of is that only water does that. When you drink plain, pure water, the water goes down into the stomach lining, and through a process which has just recently been discovered of molecular transvaporation, molecules of water are literally lifted up into the inner cavities of the brain through the 3rd and 4th ventricles, where it recondenses and is absorbed by the brain as it rehydrates through the tissues of the brain to the outer shell or the neocortex. The neocortical shell is then moistened, and that's where higher thought processes take place, such as memory. If you're not drinking enough plain, pure water, you are literally setting yourself up for dehydration of the brain. And specifically, plaques and shingles beginning to form on neurons would bring on things like senile dementias. Okay? Now, I'm going to share with you a little thing that happened to me in a group of people. I say little simply because it was never acknowledged. So we're going to replicate it sometime in 1994 in Salt Lake City, Utah, at a nursing home there. In 1986, I was called into Sun City, Arizona, to work with 8 patients who were suffering from Alzheimer's disease. They had been diagnosed as phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. I told these people I'd be working with them for 90 days. In that 90 days, I was going to do everything that I could to help bring these people back to a point to where they would be functional with their memories again. I don't know if you know just how debilitating it can be to lose mental force, and specifically your memory. There's nothing more sad that I personally have ever experienced than to see a man and his wife sitting across the table from me as he said to me, "Don, I want her memory back. If you can help bring it back, I will give you my 3 homes. I'll give you my cars. You can have the money I have in my bank. I want her memory back. She does not know who I am." This is a woman he had been married to for 35 years, who he had loved and cherished. She was his darling. Every morning when they get up, she is angered and fearful at him. She doesn't remember who he is and says, "Why are you in my home? Get out of here, get out of here." And she begins to grab pans and things to hit him and drive him from his own home. This is a woman that he has loved and cherished his entire life. You see, 1 out of every 3 people in the United States today by age 65 will suffer from some form of senile dementia, such as Alzheimer's. Women will do that at the rate of 4 times their male counterparts. Why? Well, science will tell you right now they don't know why. But I would like to give you an idea as to what I think it is. And I hope that it makes sense to you, because this is what happened to these people that we worked with in 1986. We put them on this 90-day program. I put them on 1 gallon of water every day. A gallon of water. That may have been an overkill. I don't know. I just knew that water goes back to memory. Memory means water and light. So we gave these people 1 gallon of water. What's interesting about drinking enough water, if you drink enough water for your own metabolism, you will lose automatically unwanted weight. Your physical energy will increase and your mental acuity will come back upon you within 4 to 6 weeks, typically. We worked with these people for these 90 days on 1 gallon of water a day. One lady, when I said to these people, "How much water do you drink?" she looked at me and said, "I haven't had a drink of water since I was 18. I thought maybe she had just forgotten. So I checked her medical records, and it was true. She did not like the taste of water. She'd drink punch, she'd drink Coke, she'd drink anything, but would not drink water. A lot of women are that way. That's why I'm convinced that women suffer from senile dementias at the rate of 4 times over men, because they do not drink as much water typically as men do. Men are usually involved in sports. They drink a lot of water. Women typically avoid drinking water, has been my experience, generally. We put these people out in the sun for 20 minutes. We worked it up to 2 hours. They were totally nude. It was not a pretty sight. Just kidding. Some people say, "Don, why would you put them out in the sun? Don't you realize the sun is harmful? That it will cause you to get skin cancer? It'll cause you to grow old and wrinkle prematurely? That you'll die?" And I have to kind of smile, and I realize these people have been listening and reading the wrong things. You see, there are chemists out there are doctors out there are research scientists out there that know the sun is your friend. The sun is the friend of this planet. The sun is friendly. It gives life and light and warmth and everything to this planet. It is our friend. Now I realize that you've been told there's a hole in the sky, a Henny Penny story, that the sky is falling and you'd better be careful. And you do what you feel that you need to do. I am not a medical doctor, okay? That's my big disclaimer here, but listen to this. Skin cancer did not exist anywhere in the world that we are aware of until 1950. In 1950, moisturizing lotions brought out by cosmetic firms based and owned by chemical companies introduced petroleum-based products for you to keep yourself moist. That's when skin cancer began. Skin cancer really took off and became almost an epidemic when they introduced what is known as sunscreens. I don't know if you caught it on CNN just about 6 months ago. 10 scientists showed their conclusive evidence of a 10-year study that skin cancer is up 50% in sunscreen users. Sunscreen users, it's up 50%. I submit to you, the sun is your friend. If you can expose 70% of your body to the sun for 15 minutes, your body will begin to generate its own vitamin D. It used to be known that if a jaundiced baby was born, you lay it out in the sun for a period of 3 days, and the sun would cure it. We used to be told that if you're depressed, if you have some kind of mental anxieties or depression or lethargic condition in you, get yourself into the sun. Lay out in the sun and expose at least 80% of your body to the sun for a period of 21 days. And it will regenerate the microelectric current throughout your cerebral spinal system and do it perfectly well. I think it would save all kinds of counseling, bills, and expenses if we would just understand the use of... Now, you've got to use wisdom. You don't go out in the sun and become a water blister the first day. You build yourself up to it. Next thing we did, we walked these people out 20 minutes, and we walked them back 20 minutes to oxygenate and to bring nutrient to the brain and to the body. Then we put them through the 3 psychovisual tools that I'm going to show you in this next hour that you're going to become functional with. At the end of 90 days, they were tested by the St. Joseph's Medical Center. It was published in their fall journal of 1986, one time, never heard from since. But this is what they found. 7 of the 8 patients no longer showed any signs of senile dementia whatsoever. They had their memories back. I submit to you that the reason this has never jumped on and anything done with it is because there's not enough money in water and sunlight yet. Now, some people say to me, Don, what do you mean by pure water? I had a guy in Atlanta 3 weeks ago when I spoke down there come walking up to me, and he's sucking on one of these. And he's drinking one of these, some kind of soda pop. And he's saying, hey, I know what you mean by that pure water stuff. I got me a filter at my house. I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, dude, tap water ain't going to hurt you. What is pure water? Well, pure water is H2O. Really? Bring me a couple of H2s. I wonder if we really know what water is. I have a good friend, a scientist, studied water 50 years. Heard him speak at a symposium at New York at the towers there. He stood up against his lectern, looked out at us as an audience, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a little embarrassed. You've come here to learn about water. I've studied water for 50 years, and I still don't know what it is. That was an interesting comment. But then he said this. It has come to my attention that it's as if the human body is an invention of water so that it could get up and walk around. Great thought. Water. You see, distilled water is empty water. It's a recirculating and cleansing process that nature goes through. It goes through transvaporation on the oceans and ponds, goes up into the sky, and it's empty water. It reconnects as from a gas into a liquid and falls in the form of rain. Rain is distilled water. Distilled water is empty. There's no minerals. There's no heavy metals. There's nothing in it. And so the tendency of distilled water is to gather everything into it, to fill itself up. Because it's empty, it fills the vacuum. And then as it runs to the ocean, it empties itself into the ocean and it is repurified in that process. So, if you're in a state of therapy or wanting to cleanse the body or to heal the body, distilled water is probably what you should drink. Because distilled water will go through the body and literally pull aluminum, lead. Because of the ionizing bonding at the molecular structure of the empty water, it will pull it to itself for elimination through the urinary and digestive tracts and through evaporation of the skin. If you're just a healthy person walking around, the kind of water you should probably drink is a good, healthy spring water that has the minerals in it. If you would like more information on this, we have a report at our office. It's called the Water Report. Send for it. We'd be glad to send it out to you. We have other reports you may be interested in. Some of that should be in the information pack that you have received along with this video. Now, in this next segment of this video, we're going to jump right into the actual methodologies that's going to help you to learn at the speed of sight. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. In this hour, we're going to give you a real brief history of memory and how it is that we learn, the way that it's been handed down through history. Then we're going to jump into the very methodologies that you're going to be practicing in order to build critical mass into the neuronal structure of the brain known as Area 39. Area 39 is a little postage stamp-sized area of the brain right behind the right eye known as creata magus, or the center of creativity, the place of imagination. And medical science is pointing out that it's also the control center for the immune system. What that has pointed out is that if we want to feel vital, if we want to feel happy, if we want to feel sharp, the best way to do that is to imagine yourself being that we can actually affect our own physical health by what it is that we're picturing in the mind's eye. Now, this idea of Area 39 is rather interesting, especially with the new technologies that have just been developed as of the spring of 1993. They created in that year an MSI machine. There are two of them in existence. One is at the Brain Research Center in La Jolla, California. The other is at a Veterans Administration hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico. With those machines working in tandem with the latest generation of electron microscopes, we found some interesting things about the brain. Number one, as neuroscientists, we used to tell people that every day that you're alive, 10,000 to 100,000 brain cells die and slough off. We now know that's not true. We used to think that because that many brain cells die every day, that if you lived to 80 years old, you would lose somewhere between 15 and 20% of your brain mass. You see, the brain is about 93% water. 93% water. That other 7% consists of white and gray matter that consists of about 200 billion brain cells. Now, what we have found is that the brain cells don't die, they shrink from non-use. What we understand today about neurons is that they respond exactly like muscle cells. I love to play racquetball. If I took my arm, the right arm, the one that I used to play racquetball with, and I tied it against my stomach and left it there for about 6 months, then unwrapped it and tried to play racquetball, it would probably be too weak to really do anything with it. I would need some kind of physical therapy. And if, in fact, I provided that therapy for my arm, it could become as strong as it ever was. In fact, if I increased the resistance that it was used to, I could make it stronger than it had ever been. This is what we are finding out about the brain, is that it responds exactly like muscle cells. In other words, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. The more you activate neuronal sectors of your brain, the greater skill functional you become. What we have found out is that the brain does not shrink and die and slough off. In fact, the brain, if it's being used consistently, is in a constant state of growth. Einstein's brain is on slides. It's been passed around from different universities and brain study centers the world over. They put his brain on slides in 1955. They waited till he died, thank goodness. But they've compared his brain to close to 130,000 other brains, looking for some kind of infrastructure or anatomical differences between Einstein's brain and somebody else's to see if they could find if there was any physical evidence that would show why Einstein was so doggone brilliant. And he was. He turned the entire scientific community and the method that they used completely upside down. This, a young kid that got failing grades in mathematics in his youth, completely revolutionized mathematics as we had understood it, and scientific thought in our approach to time and space and matter, our surroundings. They never found any differences between his brain and anyone else's until about 4 years ago. A young girl found it. She found that in Area 39 of the brain, creata magus, the center of imagination, that Einstein's brain, the neurons, were some 6 or 7 times larger in his brain than any other brain they've ever compared it to, whether it was brains that were considered gifted or savants, or those that are considered average, or those that were considered developmentally disabled. They never found any differences except for this one area. But the fascinating part about this is that it was the glial bridging between the neurons that was astounding. In Einstein's brain, the glial bridging between those neurons were some 80 to 90 times more dense than any other brain they've ever compared it to. When Einstein was alive, he used to pound his lectern and scream at his students and say that imagination is everything. Imagination, he would say, is more important than knowledge. And it's true. We can take our present knowledge, and by applying imagination to it, that knowledge becomes defunct, and we have a whole new set of information and knowledge to work on. It's interesting that he used to promote imagination so much, and that's what science has finally discovered, is what gave him his great genius was the center of imagination. What's more fascinating is this. We now know that if you're forming or performing a certain skill and function consistently for about 3 weeks, blood supply will build to that sector of the brain that's in use, and it will become habit, meaning permanent. What I'm going to be showing you as these 3 psychovisual exercises that we had taught those patients with Alzheimer's that reversed their decompensation of the brain and came back into function, is that these 3 exercises literally increase the size of the neurons in area 39. By performing them, you'll actually be building the density of the glial bridging between those neurons. You'll be creating the brain, building it, manifesting it into greater capacity. In short, it simply means that as you go through these exercises I'm going to show you in these next few minutes, you will be making for a smarter, more skill-functional you. You'll have a greater access to the use of your own mental force. And I guarantee you, if you drink enough water and you practice these skills and use them in your daily life, you will not suffer from a loss of mental force for as long as you live. Now, a real quick history about what happened in school concerning how we learn. You see, if I took 100 pieces of information to a college campus right here in this city and asked the students, will you please memorize these pieces of information, these words? The average student would take 6.5 to 8 hours in order to memorize 100 new pieces of information. 6.5 to 8 hours. Educational psychologists know that those same students that memorized that information and spent 6.5 to 8 hours to do it would lose 90% of that information to conscious recall within 72 hours. They will lose 70% of that information within 24 hours. That's why we have become a society based on storage, not recall and learning, storage. We will store the information long enough to take a test. When that test is over, it's gone. That's why the teachers used to say to all the students, don't cram, and we all crammed. When they were in school and their teacher said, don't cram, they crammed. This has been going on for 1,700 years. That's right, 1,700 years. That kind of learning, chant learning, repetitious learning. Education calls it rote learning, R-O-T-E. You look up rote in a dictionary, it says unthinking, mechanical memorization. They know it's not going to stay with you. Finally, there's some educators that are saying, what's this all about? These kids are learning this stuff just to pass a test. Why? Well, to get a certificate. Why? So they can be worthy to get a job. Why? Because when they get to the job, that's where they learn what they're going to do. Why are we going through all of this thing trying to find out if they can take tests? It's not sticking. We know they'll lose 90% of it within 72 hours. When you're out of school, you'll lose, we know, at least 98% of everything you were ever exposed to during that school experience. We used to question this and say, why? The cop-out answer was, well, so that you can be well-rounded. And then when that wore thin, didn't work anymore, we came up with, well, you have to do this so that you can learn to get along with other people in a school setting. Well, some of our educators now are looking at that and saying, I wonder what kids are really learning at public school. in getting along with people. And if you've been reading the newspapers lately, maybe you have a clue as to what's going on. Do you realize studies have been done and that show that in a typical 8-hour school day, students spend 45 minutes or less in the actual academic learning process? Okay. 100 pieces of information to a college campus. 99 out of 100 kids would sit there and begin a chanting process. Number 1 is boom. Number 2 is boom. Number 3 is boom. Number 1 is boom. Number 2 is boom. Number 3 is boom. Number 1 is boom. Number 2. And they would repeat themselves 6.5 to 8 hours. If there were any students on that campus that understood mnemonic skills, the skills that this wonderful goddess, according to the Greek culture, revealed to the minds and the hearts of mankind. Mnemonics, the systems of learning of mnemosony. Mnemonics is a wonderful technology, but it's not the be-all, end-all that some of the memory gurus out there try to claim that it is. I couldn't tell you how many millions of memory books, memory courses, memory tapes that have been sold, and they simply sit on the shelf and collect dust. People do not become skill functional with the information. Oh, they kind of get an idea of what they're supposed to do. They'll say, is this association? Well, of course it's association. All of learning is association. Tying my shoes is a process of neuromotor associative skill. That's not it. We need to become functional with the systems of mnemonics because it's literally how it is that we think and how we learn. You see, this rote system of learning, this system of chant learning that we have all been taught from the time we were 5 years old, if you're going to learn, you got to repeat yourself. Here, write down the word fish 25 times and hand it in. No. That has been held sacrosanct in educational circles. Repetition, repetitious learning, chant learning, hard, laborious chant learning for 8 hours. That's how we learn. It was held as being sacred by educational system. Anything that would help you to learn more quickly, help you to keep it longer, was held suspect. They'd point their fingers and say, it's a trick. Yeah, that's an old memory trick. Don't be using tricks. You sit down and you chant like a good student would. Now, if anyone on that campus understood mnemonic skills and was skill functional, I could give them that 100 pieces of information. And rather than taking 6.5 to 8 hours to memorize it and lose 90% in 72 hours, someone who understood and was skill functional with mnemonics, like you're going to be here in just a few minutes, you would be able to take that 100 pieces of information and lock it into memory in about 20 to 30 minutes. That beats the pudding out of 6.5 to 8 hours. And without any more exposure, you would retain that information, at least 90% of it, for 4 to 6 weeks with no review. Again, that beats the pudding out of losing 90% of it within 72 hours. See or no? See, sure. Now what I'm going to show you is a system of integrating mnemonics, phototelegenics, and neurocybernoptics, a science which I have helped to bring into the mass culture, and I think it's going to revolutionize how it is that we learn. When you integrate these 3 skills into a mental workout, within 30 days, 30 minutes a day invested, you'll become skill functional with all of the systems. And then speed will come into it over the next 3 and 4 months. Now, this is a skill. It's not a pill I'm going to pop in your mouth and all of a sudden you have this wonderful thing. It's not like that. It's like learning to walk when you're a child. You had to take it one step at a time, get used to it, and then pretty soon you're running, and pretty soon you're flying. That's what you're going to find here. At first, these skills that I'm going to show you will feel very mechanical. It'll almost make you feel like, well, I wonder if I ought to just use rote learning on this. But if you'll take the time to sharpen the axe with these systems, you will fly at the speed of sight. I wanted to find out where rote learning came from. It seems so inorganic and unnatural. It seems so pathetic in the way that it just doesn't work for long-term recall. So I did a little research, and this is what I found. Real quickly, here's a little educational history, just because I think it'll help you to understand how this thing is. Back in 328 AD, there was an empire formed. It was called the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. Have you ever heard of it? That's right, Catholic. What does the word Catholic mean? Universal. Sure. Uni means one. Versal refers to the power of the spin. Universal means the power of the one spin. That's what the word Catholic means. Back in 328 AD, it was the thinking men and women of the time that joined together into a great vision, what they called a mission. They had a wonderful quest. They wanted to go into all the world and help lift humanity up out of their ignorance. And so that's what they began to do. Now, their entire theology was based upon a premise of geocentricity, simply meaning that the earth was the center of this great one spin, that the earth was the center of the universe. Now, I have no problem with the Romans, no problem with the Catholics. This is simply a historical discussion, not a religious discussion as such. It ties back into religion just simply because, and I don't know if you knew this or not, all of the schools at one time were churches. Whether you knew that or not, that's the case. It was the churches that built the schools. They were the ones that wanted to educate the people. Now, they believed that the earth was flat, that it stood still. And you think about it. You go out onto the highest high-rise and look out over the planet. It looks like it stands still. You don't see it spinning 1,000 miles an hour. You don't see it flying 66,000 miles an hour around the sun. It looks like it stands still. See or no? See. So they believed that the earth stood still. And you can see why. We even have carryovers to this day. We say sunset, sunrise. It doesn't do that. The earth turns. But it's not real romantic to say to your wife, hey, look at the beautiful earth turn. We'd rather say sunset, even though it's not correct. As these people went out into different cultures, they built buildings called missions because they were on a mission. They wanted to teach humanity. Today, these missions are called schools. In the mission, they would assign a priest. In the schools, they assigned teachers. They would bring in the masses. Into schools, they called classes. And they chant the information to the mass or to the class. They are to chant it back. This was called rota in the Latin, R-O-T-A. It means wheel. It was the spin of learning, the one spin of learning. Today called rote. Instead of rota, just rote. I'll throw it out, you throw it back, I'll throw it out, you throw it back. Eventually, these schools grew into large schools called universities. Several centuries later, there's a protest movement, a Protestant movement. They broke off, started their own churches and schools, but they kept the chant. They kept the chant process of learning. So all over the planet, everyone, as they enter school at age 5, children who enter school have already learned, according to educational psychologists, 90% of everything they'll ever know in their lifetime. They know how to learn. They come into this planet knowing how to learn. They learn naturally, organically, sensorially. They are sponges for learning. But then we have the audacity to sit them down and say, okay, we're going to teach you how to learn. You're going to have to chant stuff to yourself. You write down the word fish 25 times and you hand it in. And they are so trusting that they go through this process, and in a short time, they have lost the natural, organic, sensorial ability of applying imagination to the learning process. It has been estimated that within just 2 generations after 328 AD, the parents had lost the cognitive process of how to pass on to their children how to naturally, organically, sensorially learn in an academic setting. So here we are, caught today, in an information age. There is a glut of information, and yet we're trying to learn it and absorb it using a system that is so archaic and so dysfunctional and non-functional that we lose 90% of everything that we actually take the time to try to learn in that way. We're going to reverse it. What you're going to learn in this system by becoming functional with it is this. You're going to learn to remember from perfect recall 98% of everything you see, hear, or read. Let's get into it right now. The first system of learning, and this is a childlike level, we have to begin there and bring ourselves up into ever more sophisticated systems and techniques within this methodology. The first system I want to share with you has been called by different names. Some writers call it the chain method of learning, some call it the link system of learning, some call it the fence post system of learning. It goes on and on. Basically, it works like this. If you have some information that you want to retain, all of learning, all of memory, is based on the power of sight. And when I say sight, I mean S-I-G-H-T. In other words, we see something. But at the same time we see it, we say it to ourselves. That is called sight, C-I-T-E. We say it. And lastly, if we want to retain it, we have to give it a location. We have to put something in its place if we want to know where to go and look to get it when we want it. That is called sight. S-I-T-E. So when I say memory at the speed of sight, that's exactly what I mean, because that is the process of thinking. That is the process of recall. We see it, we say it to ourselves. And then if we want to retain it, we place it somewhere. I have a good friend. It's a lady. She got so tired of losing her keys and misplacing them and not knowing where they are. She walks into the house now and she takes her keys and she holds them above her head. And she says, "I'm home. I'm putting my keys on the kitchen counter." And she drops them. Later on, when she wants her keys, even if she forgot where she put them, everyone else in the house knows where they are. All right. Sight, sight, sight. Let's understand this and the way that it works into cognitive potential. Here we go. I'm going to have you use your third eye, your mind's eye. Go back and picture the first house you ever remember living in as a child. Do you see it? Sure. Stand out front. What color is that house? How many years ago was that? What's that house made of? Can you go inside that house and see some of the rooms? Can you smell any of the smells? Can you hear the voice of your mother or a loved one? Can you go to a drawer and open it up and look inside and see something that was there all those years ago? We don't take time to reflect and to use this much. Therefore, the ability is rather dormant or stagnant in most of us. You know, you can not only reflect the past, but there's interesting scientific experiments right now showing that we can reflect and see the future. As you understand the relativity of time and space, all of a sudden some of this starts to make sense. We have workbooks on some of that if you want to go further with this thing. But right here, our intention is to teach you the methods to work with this picturing system and understand how to lock information in quickly, once and for all. If you will, picture the following story in your mind's eye. See it here. Don't just hear my words. Picture it in your mind. I'd like you to picture a pickup truck. Do you see it? Great. In the back of the truck, you see an oversized microscope. You climb up in there and you look down through the microscope lens and you see that on the slide there's a whole watermelon. Do you see it? Then the watermelon breaks open and the most beautiful miniature woman steps out of this watermelon. Beautiful woman, long flowing hair. She comes walking out into the bed of the pickup truck. And you pick her up, and she holds her hand out like this. And as she holds it out, there's a helicopter sitting there. It actually works. And as it lifts up and flies over the truck a little bit, magically it enlarges to full size. And you look inside that helicopter and you notice there's a billy goat, a goat, flying this helicopter. You get to looking in this goat, and he's got some horns on, and hanging off one of his horns is a canteen, a water container, a canteen. You go over and you take this canteen and you open it up. And you pour it out, and what comes out is $100 bills. And you think, this is great. And you're looking at this money, and you pick it up. But instead of being a picture of the President of the United States on there, There's no president at all. It's Madonna, the singer. She's on there. And as you're looking at her, you notice that on her left cheek, she has tattooed a message. And you get looking at it, and you see that the message says, I love you. Okay, enough of the story. What I would like you to do at this point is simply to put your VCR, this video, on pause. And when you do, go back and picture in your mind every image along the way and see what colors you put into it. What color was the hair on the miniature woman, etc.? You know, were there colors there? Was there action? What did your imagination do in this? Or was it just a black and white process that we're going through? Come back to us in just a moment. Welcome back. What I would like you to do now is to say to yourself, how easily was that I went through that list of words? Was it pretty easy? Did I stumble anywhere? If so, where did I stumble? Why did I stumble? The keys to your imagination in this process is seeing color in your pictures if you can, seeing action, things happening in the picture if you can, seeing unusual things, you know, like Alice in Wonderland, walking up and looking at the looking glass and stepping through and seeing a big white rabbit. That's unusual. Use exaggeration in your pictures. Seeing a miniature helicopter all of a sudden go to big size, that's an exaggeration. But you can do that here, and that's part of the process of imagination. If you will, what I would like you to do is turn off your video or put it on pause and go through that story backwards. Go through it backwards. Start with the message on Madonna's face and go right back through the thing in a backwards motion. In other words, reverse. And then get back to me. Great. Welcome back. How did it go? You see, when we use rote or repetitious learning to learn something, like our ABCs, do we really know it? Chances are probably not. Oh, sure, we all think we know our ABCs because we can go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. But what if someone said, say it backwards? Z, Y, X, W, V, V. Why do we get stuck if we know it so well? Why can't we just say Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, H, D, F, E, D, C, B, and A? Why can't we start in the center and go either direction? I'll tell you why. It's because you learned it using rote. If you'd have learned it with the methods that I'm going to show you here, and as you're learning right now, all of learning will become holographic. It'll become three-dimensional. You'll see things forwards and backwards and inside and out. You'll be able to roll things around inside of your head and see it. It will increase the pool of your own creative intelligence, the pools of your imagination. You'll find yourself much keener intellectually and your mental force much sharper as you use these systems and work with them. Let's go to the next level of mnemonic skill. Now, as I'm going through this in the video, you have to understand that the workbooks that we have produced for you that's inside of the package that you got with this video is to help reinforce and to teach you an ever-expanding understanding of all of this methodology. So don't take it just from the video. Support this with all of the posters, the lithographs, the art of memory pieces, the printed materials, as well as the audio tapes. All of it will reinforce this, simplify it, clarify it, and help you to become functional with this entire thing. In all of the world of information, all information falls into one of two categories: abstract, concrete. Abstract information is information that we're just not familiar with. Concrete information is things that we know, but maybe we've forgotten. We just need review. What I'm going to share with you now is that numbers typically are abstract pieces of information for most people, unless you have a left brain numeracy, which seems to be a natural skill for numbers. Some people remember numbers without even trying. They have what is called a numeracy pattern. Others are more linguistic. They would have a better time remembering people's names, or maybe remembering poetry. But when you give them numbers, they have no idea, no clue. So we're going to take numbers now and assign a concrete image to the abstract symbol of a number. Just follow with me, and what I would like you to do is just simply picture in your mind the following symbols for the icons or the number glyphs. Here we go. Number 1, if you will, just picture in your mind the number 1 being like an arrow. And of course, in ancient Greece, remember Mnemosyne with the arrow that she's holding? The arrow was the beginning point. It's what came out of the promise of learning and understanding. So here we go again. Number 1 is arrow, because it looks like an arrow. 1 is straight like an arrow. Just picture it, and then you've got it. Number 2 is going to be a swan. See the long neck? Now I realize I'm not an artist, and so you need to do this yourself in your own head. Number 2 is swan. Number 3 is Dolly Parton. Okay, hey, it works for me. All right. If that's offensive to you, you don't like that, you change it. Maybe you can make it a seagull flying sideways. Okay, you know how a seagull looks. Maybe it's a seagull flying sideways. For me, I'm not embarrassed. It's not offensive to me. I use Dolly Parton. Okay. Number 4 is an upside-down chair. Number 4 is an upside-down chair. Do you see what I'm saying? Now make sure you picture it here. Just take a second, and you've got it. Okay. Number 4 is upside-down chair. Number 5 is a wave on the ocean. There's a wave, and it's curling up, just like on Hawaii 5-0. If you were a surfer, you'd be shooting the tube right through here. Okay? Ocean wave. Number 6 is an elephant's trunk. I don't know how to do an elephant, but elephant's trunk. Okay? 6 is an elephant's trunk. Number 7 is a flag and a pole. 7 is a flagpole. Now I realize this is a child's-like level, but please condescend. Come down to my level for a while. Don't be too uppity. And do this, because it'll take us up into a very wonderful, sophisticated system of alphanumerics, which will give you an unlimited ability to memorize and retain information. Number 7, flagpole. Number 8, we're going to use it as a racetrack. Okay, maybe you can see motorcycles or race cars racing around. 8 is a racetrack, figure 8. Number 9, you see a basketball backstop, and here's the net. Somebody shoots the ball, makes 2. Okay? Basketball. Number 10 is a baseball bat and a ball. Now, let's review it for just a minute. What's number 1? Good. Number 2? Good. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, if you missed any of those along the way, it's simply because you had other thoughts when I asked you to picture that thing and you didn't picture it. If you didn't get them, put it on reverse, go back, pick it up, make sure you have it. Don't go through this thing without understanding and being able to do it. Skill function is what we're looking for here, not, well, I know about that. We're looking for skill function. There's a difference between thinking you're familiar with how somebody memorizes 100 things and being able to do it. Okay. What's number 10? Good. Number 9? Good. All right, here we go. Number 11. 2 skis in the snow. Okay? 2 skis stuck in the snow. Number 12 is a ski pole and a skinny skier. Here's his skis. He's really skinny, this little guy, and he's holding onto a ski pole. 12, skinny skier. Okay? Number 13, well, butterfly. By the way, you could use any symbols for these numbers. If you don't like some I've used and you got a better one, use yours. Okay? Number 13 is a butterfly. Here's the wings folded up. Okay. Number 14 is lightning. You look in the sky and it goes. 14 is lightning. All right? Good. 14 is lightning. Number 15 is Fred Flintstone. I don't know how to draw him. I don't know. Anyway, Fred Flintstone. There's his big nose, hair coming out. Fred Flintstone. Okay? Fred Flintstone. 15. 16 is a little brass candlestick holder. Put your finger right through there. You've seen the little brass candlestick thing. Okay. Maybe Sweet 16. Okay, here we go. Brass candlestick holder. Number 17, crust. And there's the brush, paste on there, and there's the brush. 17, toothpaste. All right? Number 18, we're going to use a snowman. And he's holding on to a broom. 18 is snowman holding on to a broom. Great. Number 19 is two balloons with the strings, and this one popped. Two balloons, one of them popped. Number 20 is a ball of yarn. There's the ball of yarn sitting on the carpet or something. Strings hanging out forms a two. Two is a ball of yarn. Now, let's go back and review. What was number 20? Good. What's number 11? Number 12? 13? 14? 15? 16? 17? 18? 19? And 20. What was number 1? Number 5? 7? 10? 20? 3? 6? 4? 5? 9? 12? 16? 17? 19? 1? 5? 2. You see, I was going fast purposefully because I want you to understand that the faster that you move this, the more used to speed that your brain gets. And you're going to learn something about memory. The faster you learn something, the longer you will recall it. That is an absolute fact. The longer you take to learn something, the more quickly you'll forget it. If I take 8 hours in order to memorize 100 pieces of information, I'll forget 90% of it within 3 days. If I use mnemonics and I can learn that same information in 20 minutes instead of 8 hours, I'll retain it for 6 weeks. And what you're going to learn is, when you learn at the speed of sight, if you can learn 100 pieces of information in 10 seconds or less, you'll remember it indefinitely. Some of the strongest memories you have happened in an instant. You think of some of the accidents that you have had. They happened instantaneously, and yet they are some of the most profound and indelible, impressed memories that you live with. The faster you learn something, the longer you retain it. They have found this to be true in reading. The faster you read, the more you retain and comprehend of that which you have read. The slower you read, the less you can recall. There are people who read so painfully slow that when they've finished reading a page, they have no idea what they have read. Reason. The eyes were following the words. The mind was bored, and so it was thinking other stuff as the eyes were reading. The faster you read, the more you comprehend and recall. The faster you memorize, the more long-term that information is. Now, what I want to do at this point is to introduce you to a system of placement. Site, S-I-T-E. You have a number, and you see it as what? That's right, an arrow. It becomes your locator, or your loci placement of information. It's your locator. It's what you look to find what it is that you've memorized. For instance, if I write down the word watermelon, let's say that that's your data bit. That's what it is that you've got to learn. Watermelon. You need to make a connection. Some connection that you can say to yourself that has happened between watermelon and arrow. Now, if all you did was stick the arrow in the watermelon, that's okay, but that's not a heck of a lot of imagination. In Orlando, about 4 weeks ago, I taught a seminar down there. A young girl was there with her mother. She was 11 years old. I said, "What did you picture for arrow and watermelon?" She said, "Well, I saw this little boy, and he was out in the garden, and he found an arrow, and as he went to pick it up, the arrow just got up and went over, and it picked a bell pepper, and they went off, and they were looking for watermelons." And she was going, I mean, talk about imagination. That's what we need, is to become more childlike and picture and see things in here the way a child does. That's how we'll learn how to learn. So if you will, see some kind of activity, some kind of action happening between arrow and watermelon. Okay, if it's too tough at this point, just stick the arrow in the melon. That's okay. All right. Here we go, number 2, if you will. Number 2, and the word that I'm going to give you is book. So you need to make a connection between swan and book. Make some connection, some visual thing that you see. Okay, good. Number 3, we're going to use money. So you make a connection between Dolly Parton and money. Some visual connection. Okay. Number 4 is going to be an upside-down chair, and the word we're going to use is wall. Now, I realize these are very simple nouns and ideas. You can get into abstract information on this thing as you go along through this system. Okay, you'll see how you can apply this to calculus, to chemical formulas, to foreign languages, to whatever. Wall. Upside-down chair, wall. Number 5, word we're going to use is flower. 5 was an ocean wave, and it's flower. Okay? Now, we could go up all through 20, but I want you to do that on your own. Have somebody give you a list up to 20 words, and you tie it in with each one of those number locators or loci placements. By the way, what word did we give you for number 1? That's right, watermelon. How about number 2? Number 3? Number 4? And what was number 5? Very good. I want you to put your VCR on pause, and if you have to, write out your own list of words up to 20. And when you're finished and you've pictured them, put it away, pull out another sheet of paper, number 1 to 20, and you write down each of the pieces of information. I want you to see that you can do this, that this does work. Then, take a new piece of paper, and number 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, and do it right down to number 1, and do it backwards. Okay. One of the best things you can do at this point is to teach someone else what it is that you have just learned. By teaching them, it will reinforce the entire system, and through the wonderful mechanism of the reticular filtering system, which is in each of us, it will allow us to actively contribute to the system in some new way. By teaching someone else, you will learn something new in that process. It's the new things that you learn that I hope that you will write to our company, InnerDynamics, and share with us. Because if it's something really wonderful, and if we can help to put it into the system, you could possibly be paid for that or have an income from it. So keep us in mind, or you can do it yourself on your own. Either way, I'm happy. Okay? So for just a moment, if you will, put your camera on pause, and we'll get back to you in just a moment. Thank you. Before I give you the alphanumeric system, I just want to give you a simile, a metaphor of some kind, to help you understand the capacity of your brain. It has been stated by different cognitive scientists throughout time that if you took a kernel of wheat and walked into the largest cathedral in existence on this planet, and walked into that cathedral and set it down, this little kernel of wheat, in the middle of the floor, and walked back out, and peered in and saw the kernel of wheat on the floor, that would represent all of the information that is available on this planet. The kernel of wheat would represent all of the information we have, all of the knowledge which we have. And the space inside the cathedral would represent the relationship between the information and the capacity of your brain. With that in mind, I'm going to teach you now the ancient secret code of memory. That ancient secret code of memory is located on one of your Art of Memory lithographs, which we'll show to you on the next video. If you'll read through the story and learn the 100 vocabulary words of that ancient system of learning, you'll be well on your way to memory at the speed of sight. Right now, let's jump into the alphanumeric code. This code goes back literally 4,000 to 5,000 years ago that we're aware of. People have died because they revealed this code to others that were not part of their fraternity or their brotherhood or their sisterhood. Others died trying to protect it and not reveal it. The last person to die for having revealed this ancient secret code of memory was Giordano Bruno, who revealed it to the King of England, who the king had promised Giordano that if he revealed the code to him, he would give him something like 10,000 pounds of gold and his freedom in his kingdom. Giordano revealed it. Immediately he was seized upon and thrown in prison. A couple of years later, he was killed. From that point, this secret code has been made free and available to just about anybody and everybody, but it's as if it has dropped out of sight. Why they don't teach this in the public school system, I will never know, because it is this ancient secret code of memory that unlocks the vast potential of the human intellect and what we can learn and store and keep for conscious recall. You learn this secret code, and then you learn from the workbook the 1100 vocabulary system that is there. And you will join the ranks of less than 100 people in the world that have ever been functional with this code. Pythagoras was, Aristotle was, Einstein was, Leibniz, Riemann, Da Vinci. Others have been skilled in this code. I have started what I call the 1100 Club. When you are skilled in this code, you write me or you call me. I have 2 or 3 questions to ask you, and if you answer them properly, I'll know that you know this code, and I will send you a certificate of honor. I believe that within the next 3 to 5 years, there will be corporations who, if they see on the application or the resumes of their people that they have this honorary certificate from Inner Dynamics that you belong to the 1100 Club, I think that you will get the position that is being offered over someone who does not have it. That's where we're going to take this. It's new in today's society. It's very ancient, according to history. Here it is. The ancient secret code of memory works on alphabet and numerical values. Here's the first half of the code, and you have to memorize this. I'm going to help you do it. Here's the first half of the code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Do you think you can remember that? Only kidding. Now, what we're going to do, this is the numeric part of the code. You see, when from Arabia they introduced the glyph of the 0 or the cipher, they made it so that all of mathematics could be represented in these 10 digits. And the beautiful part about this is in these ancient cultures, they believed that all things were numbered unto God. Now you're going to understand the mystery of that statement. Because what the alphanumeric system does is that it gives a number to everything that we have a word for. You will be able to memorize as many pieces of information at once as the number of words that you know, literally. If you know 250,000 words and you had the mental energy, you could literally retain 250,000 pieces of information using this system. You'll see how this unfolds as you get used to it in just a second. Let's give you the alphanumeric part of this code. You see, it works on sound and the value, the number value of those sounds. Here we go. The number 1. The sounds of 1 is T, TH, and D. But you need to remember that. The way that we're going to help you remember that is this. Just remember that the number 1 is straight like a T. In fact, if you put a 1 over it, it makes a T. TH is just a bunch of 1s placed together. T, H. And if you take a D and put a belly on it, there you take a 1 and bend it, or a belly, you have D. So T is T, TH, and D. The sounds, not the spelling, the sounds. More on that in a second. The second number, the sound is N. N. A good way to remember this is if you turn a 2 around, it looks like an N. 2 is N. 3 is M. If you turn a 3 around, it looks like an M. In fact, the corporation 3M has its roots originally in this system. Number 4. If you look at a 4, it almost looks like a backwards R. 4. And the word for ends in R. So the sound of 4 is R. R. Picture this in your mind. Number 5, if you look at a 5, the sound of it is L, but a 5 looks like an L. There's the L, and then you put the belly on. Also, 5 looks like an L. 5, L. Okay? Here we go. Number 6 are the soft sounds. 7 are the hard sounds. Some of the soft sounds in our language are these. SH, as in shoe. CH, as in church. G, wherever a G sounds like a J, they're both soft. G as in George. It's a soft sound. DG sounds like a J. Lodge. Lodge. Those are the soft sounds. They have a value of 6. The hard sounds of 7. A hard sound is the sound of K. Therefore, a C as in cat is a hard sound because it's a K sound. Q as in quick. X is a hard sound. ING is the ending of a word. Ing is a hard sound. So these are some of the hard sounds in our language. Also a G as in girl, where a G doesn't sound like a G or a J, it's a G, you know that's a hard sound. Okay. One of the ways to remember that 6 is the soft sounds is that 6 itself is a soft sound, okay? 6 is a soft sound. 7, if you look at a 7 and do it with calligraphy, you could use a bunch of 7s to make a calligraphic K. See the 7s? Here's a 7 upside down, here's a 7, 7, 7, 7. So it makes the hard sounds. 8, in cursive, if I were to write the letter F, it almost looks like an 8, right? So 8 is the sound of F. And in our language, PH also sounds like an F, and so, okay, wait a second here. Let me put it down here. F, PH, and also V is a sound of 8. Okay, and then right in the crux of an 8, you'll see the letter V. Same way with their cursive F, the letter V. So F, PH, and V. Now you can take the time to put your video on pause. You can take your time to go to the alphanumeric lithograph, which we have, that teaches all of this. Or you can stay with me and try to pick it up right here. Back it up, listen to it again. But here's the code. 9, if you turn it around, it looks like a P. If you turn it upside down the other way, it looks like a B. So 9 is P and B. 0, you look on Superman's chest, and you see an S. So 0 is S. But then along comes Zorro and goes, and so 0 is also the sound of Z. And it's also the sound of soft C, as in scent. Okay? If the C sounds like a K, as in cat, you know that's hard, so that's a 7. But if it's soft, or sounds like an S, you know it's a 0. You look at a soft C, and it looks like half of a 0. Okay, so C is 0. That is basically the alphanumeric code. There are some exceptions because of the transliteration from the ancient Hebrew, the ancient Greek, the ancient Phoenician, and Egyptian into the English. Here are the exceptions. A, E, I, O, U. The vowels have no numerical value in this system. A, E, I, O, U. A sounds for hearing. E was the sense of smell or the nose. I was sight. O was sound of the mouth. And U was the feeling or the shape of you. And so these sacred sounds, A, E, I, O, and U, in the ancient Hebrew were never written. They were too sacred to be written. And in this system, the vowels have no numerical value. The other exception in this code, because of transliteration, is this. Silent letters have no value. You have to remember that this system is a system of sound, not spelling. So as in the word knife, because you don't pronounce the K, it's silent, there's no numerical value in this. The N would be a 2, because there's no value to the vowels. They're ignored. F is an 8. So the numerical value of knife is 28, not 728, because it has no value because it is not pronounced. The other thing that you need to be aware of in this system as you pick it up and begin to understand it, and the beauty of this thing becomes revealed to your mind, the thing you need to watch for is double letters, as in the word letter. They only have one numerical value. Double letters only have one numerical value because you don't say it twice, you say it once. Letter. You don't say let-ter, you say letter. So the numerical value of this word is L, which is 5, no value, 1, because there's only one value to double letters, no value, R is 4. So the numerical value of letter is 5, 1, 4. In the next tape, as you put it in, you're going to begin to see and understand and have revealed to you how it is that this beautiful alphanumeric system that's 4,000 or 5,000 years old is absolutely brilliant and relevant to our time in this information age and what it can do for us. We'll be back with you as you put in the next video. Thank you.